April marks Behavioral Health Today's 5th anniversary. To celebrate our 5th year mark, we're releasing 5 shows this week, 1 episode each day. 2 will be new shows, and 3 will be some of our favorites in the past year. We hope you enjoy all of them, both new and old, and we look forward to bringing you another year of trending and relevant content in behavioral and mental health.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor, and today I'm joined by Ross Ellenhorn. Ross is a renowned thought leader in mental health and addiction recovery, known for pioneering innovative community-based approaches. As the founder and CEO of Ellenhorn, the nation's most comprehensive community-integrated program, Ross is dedicated to helping individuals recover and thrive outside of traditional hospital and residential settings. With a joint PhD from Brandeis University in social welfare policy and sociology, Ross has become a sought-after speaker, consultant, and advocate for reimagining behavioral health care. His work challenges conventional paradigms, emphasizing collaborative, creative, and authentic relationships in the healing process. We're thrilled to have Ross join us today as we delve into the art of psychotherapy as an improvisational practice, grounded in collaboration, creativity, and authenticity, challenging traditional labels, inspiring hope and resilience, and empowering individuals to navigate their journeys towards healing and growth. Ross, it's so nice to have you with us here today. Welcome to our show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you here. You know, as we jump in today, I'm familiar with a number of programs providing psychiatric care, with most advertising programs that focus on what they describe as a whole person care or integrative care. But these programs typically focus mostly on looking at the clients from maybe a physical or emotional and their psychiatric issues. And, you know, while these are not incorrect focuses in any way, most programs don't tend to look at helping the client socially. And this appears to be one of your program's cornerstone features. Explain to us, if you would, the importance of addressing the physical, the emotional, the psychiatric issues within the context of one's social life.
Yeah. First of all, I'm trained as a sociologist. I'm also trained as a psychotherapist. But if you look at a lot of these sites, these places that kind of advertise regarding whole person care or integrative care, they use these kind of like Zen stones. They show these stones and they show like 3 of them. And it's mind, body, spirit.
That's right.
And I find that remarkable that the social isn't one of those stones, because the social is actually not a stone. It's a giant boulder. I mean, it's the number one thing that our brains are built to do. We are the most collaborative animal on Earth. We are the only animal, basically the only animal that collaborates to invent, to innovate. So our brains are built, the neocortex is built for interacting with other people to create things for our own survival. So how is it that so much of the psychiatric and psychotherapeutic profession ignores that? And for me, it's the fundamental thing. That doesn't mean that there is not a thing called mental illness that happens in one's brain or in one's personality. But if we're going to help a person recover regarding those experiences, they have to have the right social experience around them. They have to have the right social ingredients.
Yeah.
Things like social support are really vitally important. The sense of purpose, sense of meaning. These are all things that are given to us socially. You can't actually develop meaning and purpose without that kind of social thing. Without those, people don't change. So even if you're kind of working on depression or anxiety or something like schizophrenia, without those things around you, you're not going to do the work to move forward. You're going to feel stuck and demotivated. These are the things that motivate us in the world. You know,
I think that is such a key piece. And I know that, you know, your program appreciates how disruptive seeking traditional inpatient psychiatric care can be to one's day-to-day living and taking them out of their context. So, you know, it takes them out of their living spaces and places. And apart from those things, like you're saying, that can be so important and stabilizing to them, including their, you know, what's is huge, their purpose, their personal drive, their familiar environments, et cetera. Expand upon, just for our listeners' sake, you know, how disruptive traditional programs can actually be in the treatment process.
Sure. Yeah. So if you think that our social experience is kind of the medicine for motivation. In other words,
Yeah.
psychotherapy professions have not really done a great job of describing what motivation is. They use these words denial and resistance, which are, interesting terms. There's no kind of scientific proof of denial and resistance. What we know from social psychology is a significant amount of our motivation has to do with having social resources around us.
Yeah.
So in some ways, all treatment isn't really about the treatment. It's about the motivation of the person to accept the treatment and use it in their
Really good.
lives, right? Care and treatment don't work if the person's not metabolizing it, bringing it into their consciousness and using it in their own lives,
Really
right?
good.
And so what we're saying when we put people away is that they're not ready for the medicine that will help them recover. We're saying you're not ready to do these things that are actually the medicine that's going to get you to recover. There's an insanity to that, right? We're taking you away from the medicine to get you to heal, because the medicine is having all these social resources around you.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you're also injuring the person, because in most ways in which we're practicing psychiatric care in this country, it's all about getting rid of symptoms, not about how do we get you to a sense of purpose and meaning in your life. How do you have more sense of aliveness and connectedness?
Mm-hmm.
And the message is always you're broken and you need fixing. And so it's all about your brokenness. It's all about experts intervening on your brokenness instead of you participating in your recovery. That causes what I call psychosocial trauma. It makes a person feel broken and like they can't make their life work.
Boy, that is so good. That was really rich. Just a little sidebar real quick. I picked up the book by Viktor Frankl, and Man's Search for Meaning. And in the very beginning, he's talking about how in the absence of having meaning and the importance of what you're saying here too, the importance of the meaning, the social context in someone's life. And that's what you folks do really well. You work to keep the purpose in someone's life. And as you're seeing it driving everything that we do. And what I love is that your program develops kind of this virtual hospital without walls where you provide treatment in the community, meeting people where they're at in their lives with a team that beautifully wraps themselves around the patient in their community versus, like you said, behind locked doors in a hospital.
Yeah.
Explain and illustrate that for us a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, first of all, let me just say, like, Viktor Frankl, Eric Fromm, Rollo May, there's a whole period of time that I was raised in. So I feel like this person from another planet when I hear people talk about use this best practice technique to get the person's symptoms down. I don't even know what that means. I don't get it. Right? It doesn't feel therapeutic to me to say what we're doing is getting rid of symptoms. Instead of what we're doing is removing symptoms to get the person to where they want to go.
Yes.
What gives them meaning in their life. I feel like an old person when I'm hanging out with all this talk about use this technique and this technique will change the person. As if the person is sort of like this broken refrigerator that needs fixing, and you send them back to the warehouse and they work on it and then they send it back with a warranty,
I think that's how it's seen. I really do. I think, what's the shelf life on this, admission and discharge, and when are we going to, the revolving door idea? But your statement I want to hold and have you continue on, please. You want to remove the symptoms to get to the meaning of someone's life.
Yeah.
That's really going to be driving them and giving them purpose and intent. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, I just, that is in what people like Viktor Frankl and Eric Fromm and all these people were warning about was a world in which we stopped thinking about that and where we started thinking about people as objects.
Yes.
As dehumanized objects. That's what their main worry was back then.
Yeah.
And our profession has taken part in that. Said you're broken, and it's the same thing as being a broken machine. And so you have this kind of brokenness, so we'll use this kind of screwdriver to fix you. So the way that this hospital without walls things works is there's an idea in our profession called readiness. Like, you're not ready to go back to work. You're not ready to have a romantic relationship. You're not ready to make friends. You're not ready to do this. You're not ready to do that until you go get fixed. So again, there's that model. You can't have the medicine until you're fixed.
Right.
To give them the medicine in a way that happens while they're having the problem is to surround them with a really assertive team, where the psychiatrists are a central part of that team, right? Not some psychiatrist from outside who comes in and sees the client for a few minutes, but a psychiatrist is completely involved in this whole person approach. Because what you're going to have to do is really keep track of how to help them with their symptoms so they can go back to work, their symptoms and the side effects. All good psychiatry is the lowering of medications.
That's
That's
right.
the art of psychiatry. It's simple to get people alive. So it's all about how to get to that right place. And then also to just have this team that's kind of making sure you're okay during all that time. My program takes on people who are having such acute experiences that they can't be in residential programs on some level, right? And so you're working with someone who actually does better in their own place. And that means a lot of care. And that means 24-hour conversations. So the team is meeting like rounds at a hospital every 24 hours about the next step. Part of that conversation is about symptoms, but part of that conversation, a big part, is where are we going in their social recovery too? How are we getting them back towards their recovery socially?
Really good. Talk a little bit about that piece of the types of clients that typically will come into your program and those you tend to help. What are they experiencing? How do they come to you? What's it look like?
Yeah. Well, let me describe it in this way, that our profession has this concept of the chief complaint, which is that what does the client come in and say is their problem?
That's right.
We rarely get people that come in and say, my chief complaint is my depression. What we get is, my friends have moved on in life. I
Yes.
feel ashamed that they're doing so well, or I can't make anything work because I'm so broken. Or
That social piece is such a
Yeah.
central part, isn't it?
That's what they're complaining about. So for us, that's the chief complaint. Let's work on it. And that chief complaint can be stated by somebody who's been diagnosed with a personality disorder, someone who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia, someone that's the diagnosis having depression. Those things are important to address. But the chief complaint is always the thing to focus on, because each of those things is not going to change. The person's not going to participate in treatment and be autonomously receive help until the social part is taken care of. There's a concept in social psychology that I really feel has strong validity to all of this, and it's called a threat assessment.
Yeah.
And basically, when you look at a challenge in front of you, it becomes a threat if you don't have the resources to meet that challenge.
That's
It
right.
stays a challenge when you have the resources.
Yeah.
So you're walking along, it's kind of cold outside, you don't have a jacket on, it gets colder, that becomes a threat. You put the jacket on, it becomes a challenge. Okay? Looking at yourself, figuring out what you need to fix, figuring out what you need to change in your life is a challenge. Being involved in therapy is a challenge. Taking in all the ideas and and motivation is a challenge. Every one of those things becomes a threat if you don't have the jacket of social resources. So life becomes just threatening. Therapists become threatening. Everything feels like a threat you can't accomplish. So for clients to do the things that people want them to do, that other therapists call resistance, difficult to engage, all these obnoxious terms that are just more diagnoses, are actually a person who's just seeing everything threatening because they don't have that warm coat around them when they're looking at things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like that. So that goes back to the idea that your team does, that warm jacket, and it's not a resistance. It's just not feeling maybe kind of equipped or safe enough along the way. And so you get to your team wraps themselves around the patient. If you could maybe think of a person you guys have or are working with, and what your team looks like when they go out. Paint a picture for us.
Yeah. So everybody on the team is trained in some actual models of psychotherapy, and these models that we take on have an element that makes them capable of being used on the fly, not just in a therapeutic session. So it's ways of having conversations with people, and those conversations can be happening while helping a person grocery shop, getting them to work, helping them figure out how to apply for a job. All of those things are happening because our number one goal is to build a person's sense of what's called self-efficacy, that I'm not helpless. I can make life work. That's the number on some level, and that's a social resource. That's the number one social resource we can help them with. The other
There's
word
nothing
for that
more
would be
important than that, is there? To have that
No.
kind of internal sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's programs all throughout the country, these wilderness programs where they send kids off to build self-efficacy, which is great, but they have to come home. And why not build self-efficacy where you're at, you know? And so all of that has to do with kind of building that self-efficacy, slowly but surely, building that pride in themselves so that they can handle taking on life, some sense I can make it in life. And so that's what the team's doing a lot of the time. But the team is also organizing care around whatever's going on for the person. So the perfect example of this would be, we had a client who was in school. They had a real anxiety problem. They started drinking without telling us. They finally told us, which is probably a sign of the fact that we take on what's called a harm reduction approach to our clients, where there's no judgment about that stuff. We're willing to work with people who use. And they had to go to detox. You know, you have to when you've been drinking. Detox center said next step is for them to go to some sort of outpatient day program. And we said, absolutely not. The next step is for them to go back to school. They're about to graduate.
Nice.
The last thing for them to do would be to not graduate.
Yeah.
What
nice.
that meant was, that means we're going to drive them to school every day. We're going to pick them up. We're going to build a sort of a decision that we're going to start testing them for use. You know, we're going to check with them in the evenings.
Yeah.
That to us was a real fork in the road for them. Because in typical care, they would have just been put into an IOP. They would have been kicked out of school, and that would have been it for them.
Profoundly sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's happening all the time.
Yeah.
You know, what are the two main social events, social and psychological events that can trigger a psychotic break when a person has a genetic disposition for that? There's stress and disconnection and isolation. Who is the first person that somebody meets when they have a psychotic break? A police officer.
That's right.
That's the first person sent to their home. Who's the next person? Whoever straps them to a gurney in an emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
That is pro-symptom treatment. That's what they call a iatrogenic treatment. You are creating more psychosis in how we're treating that person because of all the social things you're doing to them. Yeah. And you know what an ER is like? That probably means 10 hours sitting on that gurney.
Yeah.
It's not like you go straight into the psych unit.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
what an isolating, stressful event.
That's right.
You know?
And it further creates, like you're saying, there's something about you that's broken. There's something about you that's damaged. There's something about you that's wrong. And all the shame-based messages and naturally become a part of this. But it is iatrogenic, isn't it? Yeah, and it's treatment.
Yeah. So much of this is. Yeah. It's socially iatrogenic. And it's psychiatrically iatrogenic. Yeah. It often creates more symptoms than it fixes. Yeah.
What I'm struck by too is that it's really kind of an intimate treatment process when you think about it, because people are inviting you into their lives to be wrapped around by you guys, like that jacket you're talking about that reduces some of the stress and lets them see that they're not going to be alone in this. You know, you talked about the two things that can, be triggering stress and disconnection. You talk about minimizing some of the stress and creating connection with this wraparound team, the opposite of typically what can set us up, psychiatrically, stress and disconnection. You guys doing just the opposite. But it's an intimate thing where they're inviting you into their lives to drive them, to maybe go to the grocery store, check up on them. I think that's a wonderful trust-building place that you guys find yourself coming to. That collaborative relationship piece has got to be such an important part.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, there's two parts of that. One is collaboration, I just think has been proven. I mean, there's this thing called common factors research, which is what are the common factors in all therapy that actually make them work. It turns out that 15% of what makes therapy work is the model you're using, only 15%.
Yeah.
30% has the therapist built a collaborative relationship with you.
Yeah.
So if you're doing some technique, the actual thing that's happening isn't the technique. It's the collaboration. If you're forming it. If you're not forming it, nothing's going to happen.
That's right. That's right.
And so this collaborate, and then by the way, the other 30% is what they call extra therapeutic events, which means the therapeutic things that are happening to the person socially in the environment outside the office. So we're trying to address both those. We're trying to address that 60, 70%. I think it's 35 each, 70% of those two things. No one else is doing that. The other element is, people come to our program and they're like, what? I get in the car with somebody? No, that's breaking boundaries.
Right.
Well, boundaries are an interesting thing. I think we've gotten so crazy about boundaries because we're looking for these sterile environments. And that's sort of like looking for these environments where nothing human's going on, And I think that boundaries should be formed about whether the therapist is trying to be gratified by the patient, that's the boundary. So that
Expand
gets
upon that a little
crazy.
bit. Yeah, expand upon that. Gratified by the patient.
If I tell a joke to a patient because I want to hear them laugh because they'll make me feel better, it's kind of breaking a boundary. It's not a giant boundary. We do it all the time. If I'm trying to feel better because they're getting better, I'm trying to get gratified. Yeah. All of those things are really, if you were to follow that rule, you're not going to end up doing anything unethical. That means you can get in the car with the client. That means you can visit them in their apartment, right? And it's not like when you visit them in the apartment, you're any more likely to sleep with your client than all the therapists out there that are doing it in their therapy offices. So that worry about this kind of close connection is just sort of BS. It's not, it doesn't change anything. And it's made it so we created these things where people have to come to treatment. And then we say when they don't come to treatment, they're difficult to engage. Instead of treatment's difficult to engage. If you're dealing with someone who's having as many problems as people are having and expecting to show up for their sessions on time, you're harming them by saying it's because of they're difficult to engage instead of, no, we should be out there helping them.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Continuing education is both a requirement and a learning opportunity, but finding the right CE provider can be challenging. AATBS, a triad company, offers continuing education for psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors, and behavior analysts. CE courses are available both individually and as part of our new All Access Pass. All Access Pass provides a library of over 250 unique courses. That's more than 800 hours of CEs, with new courses being added every month. As a special offer, Behavioral Health Today listeners can save 15% on CE purchases. Visit us at aatbs.com/BHT and enter promo code BHT15 during checkout. That's aatbs.com/BHT. Check out our library and check off your CE requirements today.
I think that's another piece to this too. You talk about can be kind of iatrogenic as well, where we're requiring them to come to a treatment that they're already having trouble maybe getting out of their home or getting transportation, or people are a threat, or they feel disconnected somehow, and it's further stressful. And they're saying, well, if you don't show up for your appointment, you're not motivated and you're not looking to get better, and I'm not sure if I can work with you, kind of thing. And you're saying, well, that's all part and parcel of what they're going through. Let's not judge them on that. Let's go down to them and let's come into their lives.
Yeah, exactly right. And what's happened from that is we've created this whole industry of what's called best practices, the best practice technique for this disorder and that disorder. Each one of those best practices are best practices that are people who are well enough to show up for therapy.
That's exactly
Which means
right.
when you say dialectical behavioral therapy is the best practice for borderline personality disorder, what you're saying is dialectical therapy is the best practice for borderline personality disorders who can make it to group every week. There's an entire world out there who can't come in.
No.
And we're saying those are difficult to engage. They're treatment resistant. Instead of, we need to serve those people.
Yeah. So it's almost like you're saying, rather than having them come into our professional lives so that, it can be almost kind of easy that way, let's go into their lives. Let's come into their context, into their social piece, and bring all the things that we can. But let's bring it into let's go to them. I think that's wonderful.
Let's go to them when they need that. You don't go to somebody when they don't need it. Is
No,
part of it because it feels self-efficacious to get yourself to treatment. That's
there
a
you go.
good thing if you can do it. But if you can't
Sure.
do it, or if you can't do it because you've lost a sense of hope because of all the ways you've been poorly treated, you need people to come out to you.
You
You know?
bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
Let me throw some, we're talking about the process of therapy here. Let me throw some statements to you.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'm interested kind of just in maybe kind of a pithy response on and your
Mhm.
perspective on each of these. Let me start it out by saying the fear of hope,
Mhm.
what is it? And how
Yeah.
can it be an obstacle in therapy and personal growth?
Yeah. So this research I do with some people at Rutgers University, and it comes out of my conversations with clients where I basically ask them, what's in your way? And the resounding answer was the sense of raising expectations in my family and myself, and the potential that by raising those expectations, I'll be let down. That's, hope is a mindset that it is the mindset. It's the only mindset that is built to get us through uncertainty towards something we yearn for. It's not everything's going to be okay. That's optimism, which is sort of a cheap emotion. Hope is the thing that drives you towards something that you yearn for through uncertainty.
Mm,
And so when you hope, it's driving you to something you want.
yeah.
And so when that hope is dashed or disappointed, you feel an injury. You feel this disappointment, and the disappointment can lean towards feeling helpless and getting your needs met. I really wanted this thing, and now my needs aren't met.
Mm,
For people in this who have been in and out of hospitals, it's constantly that. Everybody's excited. I'm being discharged, then I'm back again.
yes.
And so that fear of hope just keeps happening and happening to that loss of hope. And so then hope becomes this scary thing because it's going to drive me towards trying again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then you become demotivated. You don't want to hope again. And all the people that are hoping for you, they're like this person. You're standing on a cliff and you're afraid of heights and they're telling you to jump. And you start looking resistant because you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to hope again. What you're doing when you fear hope is kind of a beautiful thing too. You're protecting your hope. You don't want your hope hurt again.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what we find out in the research is that the people who are most perturbed by fear of hope score high on the hope scale.
No.
So they're hopeful people.
Yes.
They're
But they're trying to
hopeful.
preserve it. But they're trying to
Mhm.
preserve it because
And they're
nothing else after
terrified.
that.
Exactly. And so that I think is by the way, I think that that's actually a good way of thinking about what we call attachment events, that actually what an infant is doing when they reach for their parent is hoping.
Mm,
And when that's disturbed, you begin to have attachment disorders. I think they're hope disorders.
Mm,
And it's definitely what's happening for psychiatric patients is this constant experience of disappointment and hope. And then this growing sense that the greatest thing I fear is hope.
yeah.
And
That's a
that's holding them back. And
That's a
so
wonderful
how do you,
reframe.
yeah. And how do you help them? You help them you can't help people with fear of hope. You can't help them with hope. You can help them with faith in themselves. And that's self-efficacy. In other words, if I try again and it fails, I'll survive. I'll be okay. It's worth trying again. And so that's where self-efficacy comes in. How do we help this person build that? Yeah.
I really like that phrase. And I love the way you're reframing this hope disorder. It goes back to, doesn't it? Making sure that we're instilling meaning and efficacy
Yeah.
and sustaining that hope in a preservative way where we're going to have trials and difficulties, but we're going to maintain the hope throughout it all. So that's a beautiful
Yeah.
way, Ross, to put that. Let me throw out another one to you. You described the idea that psychotherapy is like jazz, an improvisational approach. Expand upon that a wee bit.
Sure. Yeah. So, jazz really had its moment at the same time that all these thinkers we were talking about had their moment. These existential psychological thinkers and this sort of new interest in psychotherapy as this kind of philosophy and model for life. And what is psychotherapy? Psychotherapy is an improvisational 50 minutes where one of the improvisers is compassionately listening and recognizing a person in pain.
Mm.
And it's in that improvisation, like all improvisation, where the number one thing that's going to make it work is listening and talking.
Yes.
and gesturing and responding to the gestures. That's what makes jazz work. Jazz is all listening. That's all it is. So I don't mean it as fun or joyful as jazz can be. I mean it as jazz was invented as a message to all of us about how to live in a world where we need to be able to improvise. That we're post-custom, post-tradition world. We need selves that can improvise and can find meaning and excitement and joy, not in tradition, because we don't have it anymore. We can get it, and we can get it in crazy ways, which is called authoritarianism. But we can also get it through finding customs that are improvisational. And this country has this remarkable history of elders who could teach us that we're not listening to. And those elders, I can name some of them: Bootsy Collins, Miles Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, the Transcendentalists back in Concord, Massachusetts, way back when, Allen Ginsberg. I could go on and on and on about people that were trying to teach us that the way to feel alive and connected is through an improvisational way of dealing with life. And psychotherapy emerges from that tradition, not an American tradition, but it does. What's free associating in Freudian work? It begins with the idea we don't know where we're going, but we'll listen along the way. That's really what it's about. What it used to be about. Now it's about how do we apply the right tool to the right thing? It's like, how do we use this manual to fix the person?
You talked earlier about the idea of attachments and our earliest attachments. And I think this right here is illustrated in our earliest, example of kind of just improvisational play. There's a great video, I'm sure you've seen it, the still-faced experiment.
Yes.
Where it shows this mother and this little infant, almost a toddler, kind of having this just improvisational engagement. And just how fluid that is and how beautiful it is. And the baby is just alive. And within that context, growth happens, identity develops, attachment forms, and meaning in time will emerge out of that. So I love that idea. It's improvisational, it's reflective, it's complementary, it's parallel. Yeah, that's a beautiful reminder.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many things you're evoking when you say that, but if you don't mind, I'll name them really quick.
Please do.
Well, one is that, I use that video to talk about fear of hope, because what that child is doing is hoping every time it makes a gesture. It's hoping mom will respond. And then when she stops responding, it starts to crumble into despair because mom's not responding. So
almost to the point of a psychic annihilation. When she cannot engage the mom, there's that place of extreme panic.
The panic of the panic.
I don't exist anymore. Of the ultimate disconnection, isn't there?
That's exactly right. I'm not found. I'm not seen. I'm not. Yeah, exactly that. And that happens before language.
Yes.
It's in the experience of being cared for.
Yeah.
Where the caring other is responding to you.
Yes.
It's in that experience that we hold throughout our lives, that we, as adults, we do through language mostly. But it's a dance of responding, and it's improvisational, and it's listening, all of those things. And the other thing I want to tell you is the other person who uses that is this psychiatrist and psychoanalyst by the name of Jeff Katzman, who's trained in improv. And he shows that video, the same exact video you're talking about, to talk about attachments and improvisation. Just coincidentally to me, he uses that same video. It really is a message and lesson in that, very much so. Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah.
You let me throw some out to you too. You also wrote a book called Purple Crayons, talking about living life as an art and celebrating our inherent sacred originality. Life is art, sacred originality. What do you mean by these?
So there's this book by Crockett Johnson, Harold and the Purple Crayon, that was written in 1955. It's a strange book. It's to some of us, it feels famous. For other people, they don't know it, but it's this kid who draws his life with this purple crayon. And there's no life there unless he's drawing. And to me, it's about actually how to feel alive, how to make life happen, 1955. 1955 is the year that McDonald's started. It's the year where Coke got put into cans so they could distribute it everywhere in the country. It's the year Disneyland started. It's the year in which lots of things were happening where that was about uniformity and conformity. It's also the year where the Miles Davis Quintet got put together. It's also the year where Allen Ginsberg read Howl. It's also the year where all these people were talking about their fear of this thing,
Yes,
including
so cool.
this really smart guy who had the largest civil rights protest in American history, which was the Montgomery bus boycott, who came up with this term called the sacredness of human personality, who believed, this is Martin Luther King, who believed that it's a sin to treat somebody as a unit, as a thing. And the way to not treat them as a thing is to recognize the sacredness of human personality, that each one of us is unique and fascinating in that way, an entire universe, each one of us walking this earth. And so sacred originality is about where is that gone? What has happened to it? And how do we regain it? And that's what Purple Crayons is about, is like, how do you live a life that's improvisational, that's constantly there and you're drawing your own life? The danger, as I mentioned before, and the book is also about that danger, is when you get so scared about a life that doesn't have traditions, where you get so scared of your sense that you're responsible for your improv, that you turn to authoritarian leaders. And that's the thing that's happening right now in the world, not just this country, because you need that sense that somebody's holding you through this in a way that's not improvisational.
And I think it goes back to that idea too, the conformity you talked about. That blocks our authenticity, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep. And there's a reason why we conform, and it's out of our fear of our own responsibilities to make our lives unique and profound in that way, or fear of that responsibility. And so how do we stay responsible to ourselves as being sacred personalities, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that idea that that's a responsibility that we have to ourselves, but maybe we can encourage each other in that process and be less likely to, drift towards a conformity just for a sense of safety, because you get neither when you do that. And so you guys, maybe just kind of toss out another thing here. You guys, we're talking about creativity and play, and you guys even have a component of your program with the psychedelic piece. These things can foster healing and growth in therapy, can't they?
Yeah. So that's actually separate from Ellenhorn. And I should clarify that, because we got this, Ellenhorn got this weird reputation that we're a psychedelic program. We're not. That's the place called Cardea that I started, which is separate from Ellenhorn. So Cardea was really, in some ways, about me joining with a really brilliant person in the psychedelic space and in the holding space, named Dimitri Mugianis, and creating a program that was trying to resist the way psychedelic care was going. Psychedelic care has just entered this same worldview as what's happened to psychotherapy. It's become a fix-it thing. I often say that there is a massive anti-psychedelic movement going on in the United States, and it's called the psychedelic movement, because it's so about fixing people now, instead of using psychedelics for what they might do, which is to create a state of play in improvisation. And so we're not interested in what they call brain plasticity. We're interested in play. They're different. We're interested in the state of play. The state of play brings you to life. If you feel alive in your life, it's because you're in a state of play. And so that program, Cardea, is really about that. And it's not, it's different than Ellenhorn, but it's a remarkable, in my mind, it's a very exciting program in sort of art filled and art oriented and all that. Yeah.
I love your emphasis of the improvisational approach, the idea of jazz and art and the inherent sacred. But this idea that how we play, I think going back to that still face experiment, that mother and that daughter had the ultimate in play, the ultimate in connection, and watching what can emerge from that, not just in that moment, but over the days and weeks and years of, if that can be our lives, how rich they can truly be.
Graham, I really appreciate that you focus on the still face for that, because what it's saying is play has gotten too fun a rap. Play is serious. When you watch a kid play, they're usually serious. It's serious business. Without it, we're dead inside. So think about when a child plays, 3 things happen. The thing they're playing with comes alive. they're actually imbuing an object outside of themselves as having a life of its own. And we all know this in our own life. When we're in a state of play and we're making something out of clay, the clay starts feeling like it's got its own world to it, right?
Yeah.
So that means that when we learn to put life in others, because we don't have to put lives in others, we can dehumanize others. We're actually famous for that as a species, of seeing people as its. Our field has a reputation for doing that. So compassion is based on that moment of play. That child in that moment feels what the famous British psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott called going on being. They feel alive. They're alive in that moment. And in that moment, they also feel the aliveness of their parent kind of
That's right.
containing them in that moment.
Oh, yeah.
So all
Safe.
life, all of our liveliness is based on play. And when we're alive as adults, it's because we're in some sort of state of play. I'm sure of it. And when we feel dead inside, it's because we're not in that state of play. That's how serious it is.
Yeah.
It's about being alive and connected to the world.
Yeah.
And
I love that message.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, I know as we're kind of winding down for today, I
Mhm.
would love, and maybe just kind of riffing off that just a wee bit more, I'd love you to leave our audience with a takeaway message for our time today, maybe encouraging them on how they might see, psychotherapy, yes, but growth in their lives, this improvisational art form. That's the heart of growth, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And that sadly, I guess sadly for us, but also beautifully, you're in charge of this.
Yes.
You can be given the nutrients, but if you're not ready to take them, to metabolize them, nothing's going to happen. And the message people are getting about therapy now is that it's the thing that changes them. It's not. It's the thing that creates the fertile ground for them to maybe make some decisions about change. And that's old school. That's old school. I'm not saying anything new. But to me, if you can enter care knowing that this is my journey and this person is there to accompany me on it,
Yeah.
you're in a much better place than thinking this is my journey and they're going to fix me or this technique's going to fix me. That's a really bad message people are getting now about treatment.
That's what I love about your program, Ross. We said earlier, you wrap yourselves around these folks and you accompany them in their journey.
Mhm.
You come alongside.
Mhm.
And it's a beautiful thing you guys are doing. So, as we wrap up our show for today, share with our listeners where they can learn more about Ellenhorn, your book, Purple Crayons, and also how they can best contact and follow up with you.
Okay. Ellenhorn is ellenhorn.com. My website is rossellenhorn.com. Cardea is cardea.net. And any of those places, you can reach me through those places. And Purple Crayons, it's a HarperCollins. It's still a HarperCollins website or Amazon or whatever.
Yeah.
It's my favorite of my books. And I think it's a beautiful book. I can say that because I didn't design it, but I'm saying design-wise, I think HarperCollins did a remarkable job designing it. And it's worth getting it for that, if anything.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, Ross, I appreciate your program. You impress me, and the staff you have just seem outstanding. But I really appreciate your perspective on these things in your heart that you bring to these things. I think you've kind of helped us tap back into the essence of the things that are important: meaning and self-efficacy, hope, and the ability to accompany one another in some really challenging times, regardless of the level of one's challenges. It's about being in relationship with each other in parallel, playful, complementary, joined ways. So appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed myself and I felt like I could play. And that's because you did such an excellent job holding me through it. And it's always a collaboration play.
And I
It's
agree.
always in the collaborative event. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So
you're very
thank you.
kind. Well,
Yeah.
hey, thank you again. Look
Yeah.
forward to having you back sometime.
Yeah. I'd love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining Ross and me today. It's always great to have you with us. In addition to listening today, would you consider leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with a friend? By spreading the word about our podcast, you help us grow and reach more people, allowing others to discover the valuable insights shared in each of our episodes. And thanks for being such an important part of the Behavioral Health Today community. Regarding our episode today, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show. And we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.